Hello, everyone. Welcome to Aligning with Purpose, a podcast where we explore themes of finding your true purpose, from quitting corporate, moving cities, practicing holistic health, and more. Join me as we discover our purposes together. My name is Juli, and I'm so happy you're here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'll be giving a story on how I had my spiritual awakening. If you know me, I used to be agnostic, so I had no connection to spirit whatsoever, but 3 years ago, around this time, I had my spiritual awakening and my whole life changed from that moment. So I will be sharing the whole story and where spirituality has led me today. So before we get started, I want to start off with our Beauty and Humanity segment, as always. This one's going to be a super quick one, and I was on the train as always. There were two strangers talking in, I believe it was French, and one person was leaving the train and then the other one stayed back on the train, and they're just, saying goodbye to each other after a nice conversation. And I just thought that moment was very short but simple but sweet. Seeing people interact with each other, it was a nice way to humanize people and interactions with strangers. And it was a really good reminder that it really is about the small things in our lives that matter. And it's not always the grandiose things, but really in the small everyday interactions. And sometimes it's a conversation in the subway, or it's a quick hello when you're passing by someone on the street and you see how beautiful life is, right? Like small things like that. It was just appreciating a small moment, but then being able to almost reflect that back into my whole life to know how beautiful small moments are. And I hope you're all able to also find beauty in your life, beauty in the human interactions that you have or see. And let's get started with this podcast episode. So before I get into my spiritual awakening story, I do want to share a quick disclaimer and an important note. In this episode, I'm going to be sharing and opening up to a pivotal moment in my life about my spiritual awakening, and it involved the intentional use of plant medicine. While plant medicine was extremely beneficial for me and it was a massive moment for my own alignment, I want to remind you that every single person's journey is super unique and different, and I'm a firm believer that bio-individuality is super important, and there are so many pathways to purpose, and what served me might not be what serves you. So by me sharing this, it's not to encourage the use of illegal substances, but just to share my story for entertainment purposes and for storytelling. And it isn't a reflection of my professional coaching protocols. And I'm also not a medical professional or a therapist. So by no means am I encouraging the use of plant medicine. So I just want to be very, very clear about that. Please prioritize your own safety. Do your own research of the legalities in your area, and always consult a healthcare provider before making decisions regarding your physical and mental health. Now that I've sort of gone over that disclaimer, I do want to get more into the story part of it. And today I really want this to be conversational. Again, like I mentioned, I really hesitated to know if I wanted to share the story because it is something that is super personal to me, and it is something that is extremely vulnerable that I obviously don't have to share. But as someone who is very introspective and reflects a lot on my life, I knew that this was a super duper pivotal moment in my life that has really allowed me to transform into the version I am today. Of course, when I say transform, there are going to be so many different versions of ourselves, and I think it's important to kind of acknowledge yourself in the transformations that you've had and to be proud of that. So I think with everything that I've gone through, I am very proud of the place I am at right now, and definitely having the spiritual awakening was a pivotal moment for that to happen. I also think it's extremely human to want to explore every facet of who we are, and these conversations shouldn't be taboo. I think there are so many topics in life where it's deemed as taboo, but the more we can be open and honest with not just people because that could be uncomfortable sometimes, but with ourselves, I think the more honest reflection that you could do for yourself, and you learn so much more about yourself. So this is an attempt for me to be open and honest to hopefully help you. And it's not to, again, encourage you to do it too, but for me, ultimately, plant medicine really helped me in my growth. It's really developed my perspective on so many things in life. It also helped me to go to the deep end with the things that I feared, the things that I didn't want to confront, and it was one of the greatest gifts that I had 3 years ago. Again, not encouraging it, but just to share my story with my spiritual awakening. Ultimately, as someone who is a certified holistic life transition coach, I thought it was really important to just be very transparent and honest about my holistic life, because authenticity at the end of the day is going to be very, very important. And if this is for you, that is incredible. And I want to also be on that path to help and walk with you on it. But if this isn't for you, that is completely okay too. So I just wanted to put that out there and be very transparent with all of that. Before I get into the actual day of my spiritual awakening, I'm going to preface by sort of my upbringing. And growing up, I was very agnostic. I didn't really have a connection to spirit. I didn't grow up going to church. And to be completely honest with you, I think I was very turned off by the idea of religion, church, Christianity, and the word God, if I'm being completely honest. I grew up going to a school where there was a lot of privilege, I want to say, in elementary school all the way up into high school. And there were kids that would do terrible things, and then they would just use God or going to church as an excuse for their terrible behaviors. Like that going to church consistently was going to excuse the bad behaviors that they had. Watching that really turned me off, because I knew in my morality that being a good person is not dependent on religion, and you can't use religion as an excuse, right? So I was very agnostic for all my life pretty much until 3 years ago. And I say I was agnostic and not atheist because I did believe some sort of higher being, but I wasn't fully sure in it. I just knew that there might be something out there, but I didn't think that it was in the form of a Christian God or Jesus that a lot of people believed in. My relationship with spirit was just very non-existent. Let's fast forward to 3 years ago, which is 2023. Before I started to dabble in plant medicine, I had a curiosity with shrooms specifically, because I knew that people who had done shrooms were able to tap into a deeper part of their subconscious to have deeper reflection and introspection, and to really confront their lives in ways that they wouldn't be able to on a normal basis. So I had this curiosity to feel that for myself and to understand what it was like. Every time I was able to experience a microdose, I would feel so much gratitude. I felt like I was raising my consciousness. I would feel this glow, and I wish I could describe how beautiful it was. But one, obviously there's the other effects where you see, different colors and you're seeing things differently, right? But what I really want to share is the feelings that I had when it came to what I was experiencing. And it was bliss. It was really being present in my life. And I would feel so much gratitude for my life and feel like I had more renewed perspective and more understanding towards life as a whole. And what I mean by that is it's so easy for us to be so wrapped up in our own problems. And I get like that too all the time. But when you're immersed in something like plant medicine, and when you get out of it, you just feel like your problems are so small, because life is just so much more expansive than all the small worries that you have. There are so many things at play in life, and there's beauty in that. We're only a small part of our God spark, and we're interconnected more than we know. So I was just understanding that life was just so beautiful. And every single time that I had the opportunity to experience that, I felt like I was raising my consciousness a little bit more. And overall, it was just a very, very beautiful experience. And again, it is it obviously affects everyone differently. So I'm only speaking on my behalf and only my behalf. I also want to bring up that this period of my time really started to awaken my discernment. And as I was starting to understand the beautiful aspects of plant medicine, I was remembering that it became a big issue for the American government after the 70s. After the 70s, after the anti-war movement and people were introduced to psychedelics and there was a lot of peace and love, that's when shrooms or plant medicine became a very illegal substance. It's so fascinating because something where people were protesting for no war to bring more love and unity, that was now being demonized. And I started to question why that was. So it really awakened some sort of, I guess, questioning, discernment on my behalf. And then I started to reflect that back into my life. And it was one of the reasons why I started to understand what corporate was doing to me and understanding that maybe things aren't all what it looks like. Maybe we also need to take a look a little bit deeper under the surface and not just say yes or agree just because the government or higher ups are telling us that this is the way that things are and this is what is right and wrong, because a lot of the times it goes way deeper than just that. So after we microdosed a few times, I was ready to explore plant medicine in a deeper way. So we set intentional time and we wanted to do a meditative trip. So in our apartment, we had a beautiful loft space. We each took a corner of the room on a beanbag chair. We had eye masks ready. We had our own headphones. We had a playlist that we were all going to listen to on our own time. And we were going to explore the depths of our mind. To get into the story of my awakening, I want to walk you through, I guess, everything that was happening in my mind during this trip. So I put on my eye mask and it wasn't immediate, but as soon as it started to kick in, I started to see a lot of tribal imagery. And it's so interesting because if you were to just tell me to close my eyes and imagine an apple or imagine waves in a meditation, it's really hard for me to visualize things. Usually my mind goes pretty dark and I can't visualize pretty well. But in this state, I was able to visualize so much, and I was almost seeing neon-like tribal prints coming and going. And it was beautiful, but I didn't understand why that was. I'm East Asian, I'm Japanese American, and it felt like it wasn't really related to me, right? And then it turned into the galaxy. I was seeing a lot of imagery that had to do with the galaxy and, just star systems. And again, this was raising a lot of questions for me, not in the moment, but afterwards when I was doing the reflection, because I never really cared about solar systems. And every time people would be like, oh, there's going to be a full moon or there's going to be an eclipse, I just could care less about that stuff growing up. So I was seeing all this imagery and it was beautiful, but I couldn't make sense of it. And I want to back up by saying that it's really important to set an intention before you do a trip of this sort, a meditative trip. So my intention going into the trip was to just really be open to any of the messages or any of the reflection that was going to come through, and I was fully open and ready to accept all that information as it was, and I wasn't going to resist it. So here I thought I was going to be reflecting on my current lifetime, and it went much deeper than that. Going back to the story, I was seeing a lot of, star systems and different galactical imagery, and then it went to something pretty dark and scary. I started to see really scary demon-like imagery, and there were a lot of them. I kept seeing so many different scary imagery, but I wasn't scared. And I say that because I'm someone who can't do scary movies one bit. Anything that looks scary does make me jump quite quickly. But in this trip, when I was tapped into my subconscious, none of it scared me, and I felt very grounded in my own presence. And then I saw this bright light, and I knew that this bright light was my consciousness, and it was me. It wasn't Juli Yoshinaga per se, but it was me. And what's interesting about trips like this is you're going to see things and you're not only interpreting it, you just have this knowing of what it is. So here I was watching my soul, this bright light, shine past all the scary imagery. It would shine past all these demons, and then more would come up, more scary imagery. And then this bright light would shine past it. And this happened over and over and over. You lose your sense of time when you're tripping. So I don't know how long this went on for, but it felt like a very, very long time. What I gathered during this time was that my soul had a lot of lifetimes, and my soul was able to get past all of the scary things or the negative energy, and I was able to shine past it. As beautiful as it was really confirming in a sense where I always have felt like an old soul. And seeing this kind of confirmed, oh, I've lived many lives, and it makes sense why I love deep conversations. And sometimes I'm more in like a serious mode, and I can't just be silly, goofy, and whatever, even when I want to with my friends. And I'm always like, why am I so serious? But, it was validating to know that I just really value these deep conversations, and there's nothing wrong with that, and who I am is who I am. So there was a little bit of acceptance there. After I broke through all the dark imagery, the soul just shone all the way through. There was just white light, and I had this inner knowing that my soul in this lifetime was very full. It had a full cup of love to give. And in this moment, I just knew that my mission here was to be a nurturer, I don't want to say to be a mother. I want to be a mother one day, but the words mother came up, and nurture and care. And it was the word mother in a sense where I would be taking care of the people around me, not actually being their mom, but just bringing a motherly energy into the world. With this realization that I had such a full cup, I felt like in the moment I realized the meaning of life. And I will say I have not realized the meaning of life. That is just, absolutely not true. But in this trip, I just thought that I had understood the meaning of life, and that because I was so content with my life that I had accomplished my mission here and that I was going to die. And so soon something beautiful turned into something very, very scary. I bring that up because it is so important to be very careful also with plant medicine, because you want to be in the right headspace when you use it and when you practice with it, but it is not for everybody. Obviously, my situation ended up being fine, because when that fear started to rise up, I had this overwhelming sense of this fear of death, that I was going to die at any moment. And my best friend, she also took off her eye mask at the same time, and she started to console me. And, now looking back on it 3 years later, I see this moment as, oh, wow, this moment was meant to happen. She was also meant to take off her eye mask at the same time, because she knew that I was going through such a difficult moment during that, hour of the trip. I don't believe anything as a coincidence now. Things are always planned, or things happen not by coincidence, but because they are meant for us to experience them or for us to meet certain people. But this was one of those moments where she held me and was able to just really be there for me, and to kind of alleviate my fear of death that I had. And I want to talk about that a little bit more in a couple minutes, but so just remember that for right now. There were a lot of beautiful things that came out of this trip, but there were also things that I now had to really work through, because things that I wasn't quite ready for surfaced to my life now. One of those things was understanding that our lives just go way beyond the one that we're living right now. And as someone who grew up agnostic, it was a lot to take in. Just understanding that my soul had lived so many lifetimes, and just feeling all the light coming after all the dark imagery, I felt this deep connection to spirit, that I was just a part of one. I had a full ego death in this moment, where I don't want to say I didn't care about myself, but I saw myself so equal to everyone else that I didn't have my own interest in mind. It was everyone else's and mine all at once. And I think that part of it was so enlightening and humbling, when you're able to remove your ego from a situation, and then to understand people from the greatest part of love there is. I think that is what made me also really understand that there is so much love in this world and there is a lot of good in this world, but it is sometimes hard to see because everything exists in balance and there's always going to be dark, there's always going to be light, there's going to be some hatred, there's going to be love, and there's going to be opposites of everything, right? There's going to be night, there's going to be day, and everything always exists in polar opposites and balance, right? So it's important to be able to reflect on and go to the deepest levels with yourself to also come back out to understand that there is a lot of love. I know I went on a tangent because there's just so many different thoughts when it comes to this awakening. So I think one of the biggest things I learned was that we are so interconnected, and even though we are all on our separate life journeys, at the end of the day, we are all part of the same source. If you want to call it God, if you want to call it the universe, source, spirit, whatever you resonate with the most, we all have this God spark within us. And it's so important to understand that our healing in this life is so important, because the deeper we can reflect on our own selves, even though that's hard to do and reflect on, the more we can reflect and give back and be understanding of others. We're loosening our grip on the judgment we carry for others. We're loosening the fear that we carry. We're loosening just all the negativity because we're able to empathize a little bit more. We're able to hold our hand out a little bit more. So I want to say those reflections came a little bit later, maybe like a day later, but the point is there was so much fear and darkness I experienced in that trip, but it was paired with a lot of gratitude, lightness, and a lot of love. And I needed to experience both to understand myself a little bit more. And just that experience alone made me realize that spirit is real. Spirituality is real. I'm not someone who is religious, but I believe in spirituality, where everyone's experiences are valid, where we are so interconnected with each other, and it's important to respect one another because at the end of the day, we are all here with our separate missions. We don't know each other's mission or their purposes, but we're working together for a higher purpose, and there's a lot of beauty in that. I hope I explained my awakening story well. I know it was all over the place and maybe it doesn't fully make sense because I feel like I can't do it justice because it's hard to take you through what I fully experienced and felt because I can only verbalize those experiences. But post-awakening, the next day, I woke up with the most amount of gratitude that I've had in my life. It was just gratitude to be able to experience life. You know, just even talking about this, I feel that sense of presence, groundedness, and lightness. And I remember fixing myself up some lunch. I specifically remember it was edamame and something else. I think it was mapo tofu. And I looked at my food and I was still kind of buzzing from the experience, but I just felt immense amount of gratitude because I knew that even the food in front of me, even the house plants in the apartment, I felt connected to. I just knew that it had life and we are all working together, and I had so much to be grateful for. Before I share some of like the darker things, I want to talk about the good things. So one of them was feeling interconnected with my food, the houseplants, and people around me. And the other one was feeling super connected to spirit, right? So I felt a lot of purpose in me. And that purpose was so beautiful because when you live for something and when you know that you have so much value to bring into the world, then you know that you have a lot to live for and that your life is so valuable, right? One of the things that I remember feeling in that period of my life after the trip was that my motives changed from selfish to more selfless. And of course, as humans, we're all going to have some selfish tendencies, especially because we all have egos, and that's not something that's going to disappear. That's something that we have in our human experience. But anyways, I wanted to accumulate wealth for myself before the trip. I wanted to live in a nice house. I wanted to have a nice car. I wanted to live comfortably. And I think that is very common for so many people, right? And there's nothing wrong with that at all. However, after removing my ego from everything, I wanted to make sure that the impact I was making on people around me was beyond myself. And what I mean by that is the motivation behind why I wanted something changed. I wanted to do it because it was important for me to live in my purpose and to be in service of others versus wanting it because I only wanted a comfortable life. And that's the thing about spirituality. When you start to understand that we are so interconnected, you realize that it's not just about your life and your comfort. It's what you can do in service of others, because everyone is also essentially you, if that makes sense. I know that's a weird concept, but it was understanding that it's also my duty to take care of the people around me. Like, what kind of mark do I want to make on this world? So that was sort of like the positive things that I took away. Now getting into sort of the darker aspects of this trip that I had to kind of work through many months after. I want to say a year after this trip, I had to really, really break down and work through all the shadow work and all the fears that I was facing from this trip. And so the first thing I want to bring up is the fear of death. And I know I touched on that a few minutes ago. I thought that feeling content and feeling like I had been happy with my life meant that my mission was over here. And I just started to grasp onto my life way more than I did before. As someone who was not scared of death before, I was so scared of it. And, I can't really explain why that was happening, but I just felt so scared that I could lose all the loved ones in my life. Even though now I have a way different perspective on death. Now I know that our lives go way beyond this one here, and that all our loved ones who have passed or who have gone before us, our ancestors, they are with us, but on a different plane that we just aren't tapped into on. Like, if you were to, compare it to a radio station, we're not tapped into that radio station, but they are very much there. Anyways, 2-3 years ago, this overwhelming sense of death wouldn't escape me, where I would feel so much anxiety about it pretty much every single day. It would be on my mind to the point where it was not debilitating, but it was definitely something that caused me a lot of mental distress. I started to do a lot of research, and that really helped me because I started to listen to so many podcasts with people with spiritual gifts, with their clairs. I started to listen to podcasts with past life regression, different resources that was able to help me understand more and more. And I think it was because there was so much information that was thrown at me, because I was so agnostic, that understanding that life is beyond this one was a tough one to swallow. My reality was now flipped upside down, and I was starting to understand life in a different way. And to do that is really, really difficult, right? It's like when you grow up learning that Santa Claus is real. And this is such a terrible example, but I'm just going to run with it. Santa Claus is real, and then you learn, let's say at 25, that he's not real and your parents were lying to you. That would be probably traumatic. Most of us know that Santa Claus isn't real way earlier than that, so it's not as traumatic. But if you were believing something that is real and the rug is pulled from under you, then of course you're going to have to process that, and it might take some time. So I think the combination of trying to understand a world or life beyond what I knew was a lot to carry. And that also changed my relationship with my current life, my relationship with death, my relationship with past versions of me. I will say now my fear of death has dissipated, but it is a warning. If you decide to, or if you have done plant medicine, then there could be some things that you need to work through. And for me, it was this one. The other thing that I had to do was a lot of shadow work. This in hindsight is a very positive thing, but when you're going through it, it's not easy, because you are forced to confront yourself at the very, very deepest level of who you are. So for me, a lot of it was the victim shadow. And no one wants to be labeled as the victim, nor do you want to believe yourself to be the victim. But in life, it is so common for us to take on the victim role in different scenarios. And I'm not saying that it shows a part of weakness, but it shows actually so much strength when you're able to be honest with yourself, because you're able to kind of release it more. So for me, I had a lack of agency because I was playing the victim in different aspects of my life. For example, when it came to my corporate job, there were a lot of questions that were very victim related, like, why am I not making as much as my peers? Why am I not being promoted for my hard work? Why is my life not going according to plan, even though I'm working so hard? And all of those questions, believe it or not, is playing the victim. And that was me. Confronting that head first allowed me to see, what role am I playing in this that's contributing to the outcome that I'm getting, which is not favorable? And how am I benefiting by playing the victim? And what am I really afraid to take responsibility for? So it was just answering those questions that I was too scared to confront, earlier. What I came to realize was that I was contributing to the situation because I was not taking enough agency for my life, when ultimately the decision is up to us. If I wanted to change my circumstances, then I could have. If I wanted to speak up more for myself, then I could have. If I wanted anything in life, then I could change my reality, but it comes with my mindset first, and to really take ownership of it instead of blaming an external situation for my circumstances. And how was I benefiting by playing the victim? Well, I was just able to make excuses all day long. I was able to just complain about it without taking ownership. And that felt easier than to get into the uncomfortable state of doing something different about it, right? So it was just complaining without any action. And that was benefiting me because it required nothing of me to complain. I was afraid to confront myself. I was afraid to change my life because that required growth. That required being honest with myself. And through something like a plant medicine trip, through discovering myself on a deeper level, through discovering spirituality, I was able to, have more of this realization. Really, this trip and really my spiritual awakening, the biggest gift was to be more open with my voice and to be able to share it. So as scary as it was to decide if I wanted to talk about this, I knew that it was something that was super duper important to do. These are some of the things that I learned from my plant medicine experience with my spiritual awakening, and I hope that this can help you in any way. And if you have any questions about it, I would love to share more, to be transparent about it. This is obviously a conversation that isn't just one and done. So there's way more to talk about with spirit and with, life in general. So I'm excited to share more. And thank you for allowing me to feel safe to share this. And I am truly super grateful to have this podcast where I can share my honest thoughts. I think there's a lot more to cover, but I'm going to keep it here because I know this podcast episode is getting long. So maybe in another episode, I'll talk about, what I feel about spirit, how I've integrated that into my life now, how it's really led me to becoming a coach, what my whole pathway was. But I will end it here. And I just want to say thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. And if you can subscribe, share all the things to your friends, to your community, that would be very, very appreciated. The podcast is Aligning with Purpose. You could find it on Spotify, your favorite streaming platforms. You could find the video version on YouTube. And I'm also on social media on Instagram and TikTok at aligningwithpurpose.pod. And I will see you guys all next Thursday for another episode. So thank you so much and catch you all later.